Hello and welcome to my acapella version of It's Not the Ref podcast as I fly solo and kick off the NHL season, talking a little bit about last night's game between the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs and the meltdown that is seemingly happening in Toronto in the 4-1-6, in the 6 from last night to today. But before we get there, I want to read a little bit from an article that I put together and published on GuidoPrano.com called The Icebirds Chirping in Home Opener. It goes something like this. The 2022-23 season kicked off for the no expectation Montreal Canadiens at home versus the rival second favorite to win the Stanley Cup, Toronto Maple Leafs. The game kicked off with the traditional Montreal fanfare and what seemed like a 100-yard walk to the ice as the Canadiens players were introduced. The delay between the announcement of the player names and their ice-level arrival caused an awkward delay in fan cheering, although it caught up as Carey Price enjoyed an extended welcome, tipping his cowboy hat to the crowd. As the transition continued, Captain Suzuki carried the torch to ignite center ice, as traditions are still a valued part of this franchise's identity. While the Habs' late third period 4-3 surprise win left fans on both teams shaking their heads for different reasons and in different directions, both need to remember that this is game 1 of 82. The rebuilding Canadiens had a lot of youth in the lineup, highlighted by a blue line that combined for less NHL games than the Leafs' Giordano, often showing vulnerabilities, but finding success in simplicity. The forward lines, with a handful of forwards who had never played together, fronted by the youngest captain in Canadiens history, are still finding their groove, but augmented that with determination. While inexperienced, there was team effort fueled by a desperation that surely can't be sustained over a full season. The team blocked over 20 shots, battled along the boards, and skated hard at both ends of the ice. The top line of Suzuki, Caulfield, and Anderson played like a top line, and the supporting cast did what they had to in back-to-basics play. They worked hard and were rewarded for it with a win, but fan expectations should be tempered as this team has a lot of growing to do. Toronto Maple Leafs also have a lot of growing to do, and much will be between the ears as they search for sustained confidence. While they walked into Montreal with a bit of a swagger, ensconced more in their assessment of who they were about to play instead of their own identity, that swagger often turned to uncertain saunter. They owned the shot clock, but not the scoreboard, as the late preseason power play surge went 0-4. Stars, Marner, and Matthews skated off with zeros, and the defense, especially Jake Muzzin, looked confused at times. While the roll-of-the-dice goalie Matt Murray had his glove side repeatedly exposed in his debut for former OHL Sioux Greyhounds coach Keefe and GM Dubas. Look, while the Leafs lost Game 1, they have more potential than what was demonstrated. But living up to the idea that they are the second most favorite team to win the Stanley Cup this year puts a lot of pressure on a group of players who aren't playing a team game yet and is underscored by a lot of uncertainty in net. While the fans of both the Canadiens and the Maple Leafs start the early season chirps, neither base really has any type of credentials other than some moments in Game 1 of the season. Last year's playoff will continue to haunt the Leafs regardless of what success lay ahead during the 82-game warm-up. Equally, the rebuilding and youthful Canadiens are going to have some bad nights ahead of them as they grow into their new identity under coach Martin St. Louis and the new executive leadership team. Enjoying the in-game moments might be the best approach for fans of both teams as the fun side bets and ice chirps unfold through a season of question marks and change. Now look, if you're Sheldon Keefe, he pressed a little bit of a panic button. He sold the team out a little bit. It's Game 1. If the coach is already calling out the team in Game 1, this team is in trouble. And they're not just in trouble for the season, but they'd be in trouble in the playoffs too. It's Game 1. If you're that fragile in Game 1 that you're calling out your team who, yes, they lost to the Montreal Canadiens, and they were expected to win, but they lost 4-3, and it's game one, and they weren't playing tight, and they made some mistakes, and so did the Canadiens, but the Canadiens capitalized and played with a level of desperation that they're not going to play with all season long. They're just not going to. But if I'm the GM and I'm looking at my coach, I don't want him to panic in game one of the regular season. I don't want him to start calling the team out that early. You lost 4-3. There's a lot of things that they did that were good. Could they have won the game? Sure. There was a penalty shot awarded. There was a couple of breakaways. It really is a game of inches. And I think that there's an overreaction in the facial expressions that Sheldon Keefe had when talking about the game and his team. And, I'm hoping that for the sake of some of the younger players, in Toronto, relax, Sheldon. I mean, I'm wearing a Habs logo here, but I love hockey, and you just want to be able to say, relax. It's game one. On the flip side, Marty St. Louis was pretty happy. He almost reminded me, not quite, but a little bit of like Mario Tremblay, although he didn't jump on the bench and shake his fists and wave the paper and get overly excited. But I think he was proud of how the team persevered and came back in that game. And you see some of the mistakes that the younger players made throughout that game, but there was encouragement. Some of the veteran players and the Canadiens were encouraging them. Some of the coaches were giving them, the little taps like, hey, shake it off. We're working through these things. But a very, very, very different feeling over in the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, you saw John Tavares, who had a pretty decent game, his first game, because he didn't play due to some injuries in the preseason. But you look at his face and the expressions, and man, there's a lot of weight. There's a lot of weight on that face, and there's a lot of weight on that shoulders, a lot of seriousness for game one. And I'm not saying don't be serious, like you got to take your job serious, but boy, a lot of seriousness. I mean, he came to play, but just a different demeanor or just a different feeling when I watch that. So we will see what happens in game two with the Leafs as they play the Washington Capitals. But as I'm reading some of the fan comments and as I'm watching Sheldon Keefe, it's almost like we Leafs Nation must win game two of the regular season. It's a must-win game. And goaltender Samsonov is facing his old team in the Capitals. So we will see how that goes. As for the Habs, I think they play in Detroit on Friday night. We'll see how that goes against the Wings. They play at the Little Caesars Arena, I think. Hopefully they don't, fill up on pizza. Although, what's his name there is gone now. So the pizza guy has gone to Los Angeles, so they don't have him there anymore. Dano. But hey, we'll see how they do against Detroit. We'll see how they come out. We'll see if that same energy and desperation is there. And then we can assess what's going on in terms of how the rest of the season's going to go. But I can't see it, guys. I can't see them sustaining that type of game over an 82 game schedule. There are going to be some bad nights. There's going to be some good nights. So my 5-minute power play or so of It's Not the Ref podcast as I fly solo, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care. Enjoy the games.